Hi, I'm Josh, and I am so grateful you're here with me as I talk about my worst reading year ever. At least the worst reading year since I started keeping track of my reading in 2018. Why, we haven't seen a reading year this bad since the great book drought of 1992. This was not only a bad year in terms of the number of books that I read, but it was also a bad year in terms of the quality of the books I read. The former is easier to explain than the latter. The reason I read so few books this year was because I spent a lot of time this year exploring TV series and movies. In the past, I haven't done a lot of TV or movie watching. This year I decided to do more of that, and my reading time is almost always bedtime. I love nothing more than going to bed between 8 and 9 p.m. and then just hanging out for a couple of hours reading, or a lot of time spent in 2023 watching TV series or movies. And since I was watching more of that type of media, I was spending a lot less time reading. The other thing is it's harder to read a lot when the books you're reading are okay at best. They're not the type of books that would keep me turning pages late into the night, long past when I should be sleeping. They were just good books that were okay and easy to put down. So between those two factors, that certainly affected the quantity of books I read. The quality, like I said, is a little harder to explain because I've been kind of proud of myself the past 2 years, in 2022 and 2023, over the fact that the quality of books in terms measured by my ratings out of 10 had been increasing. And so I was kind of like, well, obviously I'm getting to know myself and my reading tastes, and I'm getting more discerning about the type of books I choose to pick up and read, and more kind of better able to determine, just based on quick overviews, what might be a book that I would enjoy a lot and is worth my time. Now, this past year, of course, proved that to be not entirely accurate. So let's just go ahead and get this over with and move on to 2025, shall we? So in terms of numbers, in 2024, I only read a total of 6 books. 1 book every 2 months in the year. Just by way of comparison, I really got back into reading in a big way for me in 2021 because I read 16 books that year. In 2022, I read 22 books. In 2023, that dropped a bit to 14. And then, like I said, this year was only 6, less than half the lowest previous number of last year. So a pretty abysmal number. Despite that, I still managed to acquire 25 books in 2024, in comparison to 23 books the year before that and 39 books in 2022. I made a video in August talking about books that I had hauled over the previous year, and I mentioned that pretty much all the books, almost all the books that I acquired either came from thrift shop finds, or I acquired for free either as gifts or from local neighborhood book boxes, that type of thing. Now, in that August video, I had mentioned 20 books that I had acquired up to that point in 2024, and I only picked up 5 other books after that since August. So I'll just quickly mention the 5 other books that I've hauled for the remainder of the year. In fact, since August, I have given away more than twice as many books as I've acquired, so I've kind of trimmed back the total number of books owned a little bit. So anyhow, the 5 other books that I acquired throughout the year were this nonfiction book called Rush to Danger, Medics in the Line of Fire by Ted Barris. This is one that I found in a thrift shop. It looked to be pretty much brand new. I don't think it was ever read, so I picked that up from the thrift shop. This next one was one I purchased new from a bookstore for only $7.50, and this is a paperback edition of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. So I've heard a number of booktubers talk about what a great classic this is, so I picked up a nice cheap paperback edition of that. Another thrift shop find here was a Frederick Bachman book called The Deal of a Lifetime and Other Stories. I tend not to be all that interested in reading short stories, but I'm a fan of at least one other Bachman novel, Anxious People, one of my favorite books of all time, in fact. So I thought, well, this is a very tiny book of short stories. Might be worth giving a shot sometime. And then the last couple were also thrift shop finds. We have a book called The Prisoner of Heaven by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I have not read any of his books before, but I have heard that author spoken of highly, so I thought I'd give it a try. And then my most exciting find is a book that I was searching for months and months. Ever since I first decided I wanted to read some more of Lois McMaster Bujold's works, and specifically her science fiction series. This is The Warrior's Apprentice, which is book 3 in a series that I started in 2024, and I'm going to talk more about it shortly. I will say I was much more excited about this book before I read the first 2 books in the series. This one is going to be the one that determines whether I carry on with the series or leave it behind. I have a feeling it might be the last one I read in the series, but it's such an incredibly difficult book to find that I was super happy to stumble upon it in a Value Village thrift shop. So yeah, that rounds out the books that I picked up during the year. Now, in terms of looking at the ones that I actually read, normally I break down these videos into the low-rated books and the high-rated books. However, for 2024, I only read 2 great books, so I'm just going to go through these 6 books very quickly in order of my lowest rated of the 6 to my highest rated. And I do have videos out for all of these books that I'm going to mention briefly here if you're interested in hearing more about what I think about them specifically. So my worst book of the year I don't actually have with me because I already got rid of it. I donated it to a local free book library on somebody's front lawn here. So that was The Black Dahlia by James Ellroy. This was a noir mystery fiction book that was just so terrible that I only rated it 2 out of 10. However, the video review I did not that long ago, I will say, did not go over particularly well with people in general. I lost 2 of my Patreon supporters after releasing that video. I don't know if that's directly connected or not, but I've certainly received my fair share of comments, some of which I've had to delete, saying how wrong I was about my opinions about The Black Dahlia. Putting that behind us once and for all and moving on to number 5, I have 2 books that are bound up in one volume called Cordelia's Honor by Lois McMaster Bujold. Those 2 books are Shards of Honor, which is the first book in this series, and a book that I only rated 3.5 out of 10. I thought this was going to be an easy shoe-in for a series that I enjoyed a lot because Lois McMaster Bujold's fantasy book, The Curse of Chalion, is my #1 favorite fantasy book of all time and just one of the best written books I've ever read. And it was quite a shock to read these 2 books, which are 2 of the first novels that she ever wrote, and see just how badly written they were. And it really kind of emphasized just how writing is a craft that over time, the practice of writing definitely will allow you to improve at it, provided you have either a decent editor or a mentor or somebody to tell you how you can improve your writing over time. But yeah, seeing Lois McMaster Bujold go from this first book, Shards of Honor, to her later fantasy stuff was quite a shocking difference. The second book here was called Barrayar. I did rate that 5.5 out of 10, a little bit higher than the first one, and it was also written a little bit later, so the writing had definitely improved somewhat. Moving next from science fiction to fantasy, we have a cozy fantasy novel called Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. This is the most recent read, and I do have a video out that I posted recently. It is a fun book that was let down by, I would say, the way its climax was resolved. I think anybody that enjoyed Baldree's previous book, Legends and Lattes, would still enjoy this particular book. It's just kind of a fun, relaxing read. Going to the opposite end of the fantasy spectrum now, my #2 book of the year was Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie, a grimdark fantasy novel. I will say that the rating of 8 out of 10 that I gave this novel was a generous rating based on just how well written it was, just by what an incredible writer Joe Abercrombie is in terms of his character work, in terms of his thematic explorations, and just overall the stories that he tells. But it wasn't the most enjoyable read. It was quite a grim story of revenge and violence, and not the most enjoyable book to read. So, I mean, if I had rated the book based on how fun it was to read, it would be much lower than an 8. But again, just Joe Abercrombie's writing is just really, really something else. And then finally, my number one book of the entire year was a book that I think I actually began at the end of 2023 and finished at the beginning of 2024. This is Lonesome Dove, probably the first Western novel I've ever read, and quite a chunker of a novel here at over 800 pages. But what an incredible story, what amazing characters. I think the character Gus in this novel is possibly my new favorite fictional character of all time. I rated this book a 9.5 out of 10. It is certainly at least a top 20 book of all time for me, if not a top 10 of all time. I've seen people complain about the first 150 pages being kind of slow and boring and hard to get into, but I enjoyed just that time getting to know the characters before we really dove into the action and everybody started dying. So where does that leave us in terms of average ratings and overall quality? Well, my average rating of those 6 books is 5.67 out of 10. Quite an abysmal rating for books that I picked out to read myself. Nobody gave me these books. I chose to read these particular books. Now, in comparison to previous year's average ratings, last year, 2023, my average rating was 6.86 out of 10, and I had mentioned that year how if I could have just removed the 2 terrible books I read that year, the overall average would have been like an 8 out of 10 or something extraordinarily high like that. The year previous, 2022, my average rating of books read was 7.5 out of 10. Pretty decent reading year. And then 2021 was 6.1 out of 10. So my second lowest average of these past 4 years. But yeah, hopefully 2025 is going to be a better reading year. I think I will probably cut back on the TV series and the movies watching. I am working through currently a TV series called Arcane, which is an animated series that was recommended to me, and I'll reserve judgment until I'm finished at least season 1, but it's keeping me watching, which most TV series fail to do. So far so good. And I think actually we'll do a video wrapping up my TV series and movies watched in 2024 as well, which is something I haven't done before because, like I said, I don't typically spend a lot of time watching TV series and movies. But yeah, I would like to get back to spending more time in the evenings reading instead of watching stuff. I'm curious about how your reading year went in 2024. I would love to hear what your number one book of the year was. I'd also really love to hear what you're looking forward to reading in 2025 and perhaps recommendations of books I should be checking out. Not that I need any more books on my endlessly long TBR, but I'm always eager to hear what you are enjoying and looking forward to. So please do let me know. And lastly, before I go, just let me thank my Patreon supporters for the ability to even acquire books. Thank you so much for supporting both the time I put into creating this content and the ability to enjoy my hobbies. It means the world to me. And I'll catch you on a couple other year wrap-ups, like I said, the TV series and films for one, and then also my board game wrap-up of the year, which is going to be a little while down the road because I still have to do my games played in December video. But I will try to get to that as quick as possible. Cheers. The worst reading year ever. Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm so grateful you decided to join me. Now, this year turned out to prove myself to be... I'm a fan of at least one other Bachman novel. I think anybody that enjoy my second lowest rating year. But anyways, that be anxious to hear